What is up, everybody? Welcome to the 5th ever episode of the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I'm Marcus Whitman, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the film review from Week 12, Studs and Duds. We got a little bit of news to react to. I almost said Tyreek Hill. Luckily, it wasn't him, but the Kareem Hunt incident. What do we expect to happen there? And then the emergence of the Dallas Cowboys. We'll talk about that as well. I am very close now to getting this podcast over to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever you are looking for. I've found out how to do that. Maybe this weekend or early next week I'll be able to port that over. I think by our next episode it should be up. So that'll be exciting. And then for those waiting for the Giants rebuild, I am waiting to edit up my second episode so that I can drop the first two episodes of the series from the get-go. So that will be probably tomorrow morning. I will drop them both. So that'll be fun. Probably about 9 Eastern, I would say. We'll be having those out. So let's talk some football now. Do make sure you guys like this video, though, on YouTube, as long as we're doing this podcast here on YouTube. So let's react to the Spencer Ware, Spencer Ware's a part of this, but Kareem Hunt situation. Now this domestic violence or public violence, whatever you want to call it, he hit a woman, and it's not okay. You know, football players, we got to be better, man. That's just awful, even if this was 18 months ago. So let's just talk about the football element of this. Obviously, it's a terrible real-life thing from his perspective, from the lady's perspective, everything, just a mess. And I don't know all the details, so I'm not going to try and get too far into that side of it. But from a football perspective, what I'm expecting here is something similar to the Ray Rice situation. I would expect a placement on the commissioner's exempt list. I doubt he's going to play on Sunday after this just leaked on a Friday. So I said Spencer Ware. Get yourself Spencer Ware in all of your fantasy leagues. I think Spencer Ware is actually a really good running back. He's just been buried in terms of workload by Kareem Hunt. Will Spencer Ware... Oh, gosh, I'm messing this up. Kareem Hunt, will he ever play again? I think so. This year, though, I don't know. I really don't think so. Like, he's probably going to go on the exempt list, and I think maybe by the end of this season, as we head into next year, the Chiefs will have kind of phased this thing out, issued him his punishment, and maybe he comes back next year. But there's no guarantee of that. I do think he's more talented than Ray Rice was at this point in his career. He's more valuable, and as we keep seeing with, like, Reuben Foster, if you're worth it, if you're worth the headache of these media issues, then you're going to get an opportunity. So I think he'll play football again. I don't think that's a question. It does help his case that this was like 18 months ago, and it does seem like there were other things at play here, but obviously the video just not all right. Like, and to keep like going back to her, like, it just shows that this dude has some crazy stuff going on in his head. And then for the Chiefs, like, this hurts. Like I said last week that I'm going to start fading the Chiefs a little bit. Not that I think they're going to be bad, but I feel like they always kind of drop off in the second half of the season. Not that, you know, we're past the second half of the season, but I said I was going to start fading them. I did not think that they're, you know, going to go on this big Super Bowl run. And this doesn't help, especially if he's not playing the rest of the year. And then I want to talk about the game last night. Obviously, when we do our studs and duds, it's not going to recap that game. But that was a really fun game to watch. Defensive football being fun to watch in 2018. I know, it's crazy. But the Cowboys have done this for like a month now. This defense is nuts. They've got a great pass rush. They've got a good secondary. But they are proving that linebacker play and this is a theory I've had, is the most underrated and actually perhaps the most important position on the field. I know pass rush is great, and I've always stuck my neck out for having that elite pass rush, and it definitely helps that they do have an elite rusher in DeMarcus Lawrence. But to have speed and size in two players at the linebacker position, it is the heart of this defense. I'll at least say that much, and it is a problem. Because you can't do what makes offenses like the Saints and honestly the Chiefs, in that, some of these teams have great vertical attacks, but it's what they're able to do to set up the short game with either running the ball or these screens and dump offs to guys like Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce. To have linebackers that just come in like a freaking missile and never miss a tackle, it is so valuable. They completely shut Drew Brees out by neutralizing the short game last night. So Dallas is on the rise. I did say that I'm picking Philly to win that division last week. This doesn't help, but I will at least stick to my word until we see these two teams play next week. And let's get into the film review here. I'm not worried about the Saints. I'm not. It was a tough game in Dallas. I'm not worried about them at this point. They're still a damn good football team. They are still my Super Bowl pick in the NFC. So, what you guys have been waiting here for, the Studs and Duds recap. Our star of the week is going to be, and I actually didn't pick a star before I sat down to do this, so let's look through here. We could go, let's just name a few of the big risers here. Eddie Jackson, another great week. He's going up +2. And then how about we talk about Jerome Baker? And he only goes up 1, but he's definitely someone you're keeping an eye on here. He's actually lower. He's actually lost weight. He's a linebacker for the Dolphins, by the way. The Dolphins have dropped off a little bit, but he's looked really good. He's actually down to 215 pounds, so that's where Telvin Smith, the Jaguars linebacker, who's been a star in this league, comes in. He's just this modern linebacker for the Dolphins. We'll go with him as the star of the week. He had a great game this week. He's only going up 1 in the roster, but just a guy to keep an eye on. I love what Miami's doing in the second level of this defense, because you've got Minkah Fitzpatrick, you've got Jerome Baker, you've got Raekwon McMillan, you've got a bunch of just freak athlete guys that can run in that short to intermediate game. It comes back to what we said about Dallas, how important it is to have the speed in that specific level of the defense to stop the short passes and stuff that are just such a nuisance in the game today. And then our dud of the week, we're going to go with Blake Bortles here. There were some big fallers this week, but official Blake benching this week, and it was just a matter of time. I had a fun time going back to look at my Jacksonville preseason deep dive where I got just shredded. There were people saying, this guy never watches football, you just lost a subscription, this deep dive series was great until this video. And I basically said, Jacksonville was a fluke last year. They had a great defense, but an easy schedule. And with a healthy league framework in 2019, you're not going to be able to win football games with Blake Bortles as your quarterback. And that's exactly what happened. They can't keep pace with any of the teams in their division that come back healthy, getting their quarterbacks back. And just the rest of the league. They just lost all of their momentum, and Blake Bortles is the reason. It's literally the only reason the Jaguars are not in the playoffs right now is Blake freaking Bortles. He is an incompetent quarterback. He's going to come down 3 from 69 to a 66. I don't know if he's ever going to start another football game in his life. He could get straight up Christian Pondered here. We'll see. You could see him going on a free agent deal to be a backup somewhere, just because teams seem to be adamant about continuing to give these former first-round prospects a second opportunity. But I think teams are getting smarter with this kind of stuff. You're never going to be happy with Blake Bortles as your quarterback, whether he's starting or coming in as a backup. He's just incompetent. And I think they're actually upgrading at least their floor with Cody Kessler, and I think it was a good move to put him in because it was just a train wreck. So let's not drone on about Blake Bortles. We all know how bad he is. Just an embarrassment for Jacksonville that was their plan this year, to surround this team with Blake Bortles. So let's go through game by game. We're going to break down what I saw from each game and then talk about the players that stood out, whether good or bad. Starting with the Thanksgiving games, we've already talked a little bit about these last week, so I won't get into the games themselves. But James Daniels for Chicago has totally arrived, I guess. This was a first to second round prospect, was a center at Iowa, so he's learning a new position at guard, and they started Eric Kush at guard to start the year. But Daniels has now been in there starting for a few weeks, and he looks great. This Chicago offensive line is fantastic in pass protection, and they seem to have upgraded it even more here with James Daniels. And then Eddie Jackson, so he went up 2 last week, and then he goes up another 2 this week. He has been the best safety in the NFL this year. Consistent, but can also make those highlight plays. The burst he showed to pick off Matthew Stafford for that pick six, Matthew Stafford for the pick 6 in the fourth quarter, whenever that was. It was just a beautiful play, man-to-man coverage. He baited it a little bit and then just took off to the house. And as we've seen, when he has the ball in his hands, like, he wants to score, and he's got the speed to do it. So he is really emerging. I think he's actually passed Adrian Amos, who had a great year last year. It's not that Amos is a bad safety, but the things Eddie Jackson is doing, it's just incredible. He keeps impressing week after week, too. Next, we've got Washington at Dallas, and we saw more of this great Washington defense. Dallas defense in this game. So Xavier Woods impressed in this game. It does feel like forever ago that this game happened, but Xavier Woods, a safety for Dallas, another player that's stepping up for this good defense. He's going to go up 174 to a 75. No rise for the linebackers from this game. I'm assuming, though, once we get the film for the New Orleans game, we're going to get more rising for these linebackers. And then just a note for Washington, Reuben Foster's going to come down 3. He did not have a good year before everything that's just gone down, so he goes from an 82 to a 79. And, I bet he ends up playing for Washington. And it's kind of disgusting because this guy is clearly a terrible human being. But he's a good football player, and they have a bunch of Alabama players, so they thought, okay, we'll bring him in here, and all of his former teammates will teach him how to not be a complete moron off the field. And then you've got these teammates that went to Alabama saying, like, we don't really want anything to do with this. Like, we don't like Reuben Foster. It's just a mess. Everything's going downhill for Washington. This move could pay off in the end. But it's just, kind of shame on Washington for being the team that brought this guy in, just kind of shaking your head at the organization. The guy can play football, but I don't think he belongs on an NFL field. So the next game, Atlanta at New Orleans. Thought Atlanta played really well in this game, just gave it away with turnovers. New Orleans now, you go back to the Dallas game and this game, I frankly thought New Orleans should have lost this game. Atlanta really gave this one away with those 3 fumbles, all or at least 2 of them in New Orleans territory, one in the red zone. Atlanta, they're still a good football team. They just have a hard time winning close games, and that defense is just hard to trust. So we do have some fallers here and some risers. But Ryan Schrader, the right tackle, you can tell the protection for Matt Ryan just hasn't been as good this year. And Ryan Schrader's he's getting older. His plays dropped off. And then we got Vic Beasley. Ryan Schrader, the right tackle, by the way, he's going down 180 to a 79. Vic Beasley, the former star, I guess, for a year, even though, you ask the guys at PFF, like, he had 15 sacks on, like, not nearly enough pressures and hurries to warrant that many sacks. Like, he was just cleaning up the dust, basically. And ever since then, when, it was kind of a big deal. PFF actually kind of put their foot down after that 15-sack season. It was like, this guy's overrated. Like, he doesn't play the run. He doesn't create pressure because he's so small, and I tended to agree at the time. And he just hasn't done anything since. Like, he's just too small. They tried to play him as an off-ball linebacker. He didn't have the instincts. He can't tackle. And he just doesn't really have a role right now. I think maybe if he went to a 3-4 system, because he is playing in a 4-3 system that is going to ask their DNs to be a little bigger, like a Takk McKinley, who's having a great year, by the way. But for Vic Beasley, he just doesn't fit here. And, maybe he can go and have a decent career for a 3-4 team, but it's just not working here. He comes down 176 to a 75. And then Jack Crawford, former Dallas Cowboy for a little bit, who actually really stood out to me when he was with Dallas, just got limited reps. Well, he's getting a lot of playing time here for Atlanta. He's been a big reason this defense has actually held on and has played better than you might expect given all the injuries here. So a +2 for Jack Crawford, an athletic interior defensive lineman. So he's going to go 70 to a 72. And then Sheldon Rankin's really coming on. Super athlete, great in run defense. He can generate some pass rush. I think he has 7 sacks this year. Really liked him coming out. He's basically a mini Aaron Donald. He might be 60% of Aaron Donald because Donald's just an absolute freak. But Sheldon Rankins has turned into a nice player himself. He kind of fits that. I think he's like 6'1", 300 pounds, not too far off of Aaron Donald. Just a little shorter for a D tackle. But you guys know I love my short defensive linemen. And then New England at the New York Jets. This game was like spot on to how I predicted it. I had 28-13. I said that the Jets were going to keep this kind of a scrappy, ugly game and that New England would just pull away in the end. And you watch that game, that is exactly what happened. So I predict 28-13 in that manner, and it happens to be 27-13. So with that said, not a whole lot of movement here, especially on the New England side. New England, I feel like we have a pretty good grasp of who they are. They've got some playmakers, but Josh Gordon and Rob Gronkowski, I don't know why I said it that way. They're not these elite playmakers that they either could be or once were. They're fine players. They're really good weapons. Sony Michel's a good player, but he can't stay healthy. He even got pulled off the field for an injury, came back in this one. Things just aren't clicking at full force right now for the Patriots. They're going to be in the playoff picture. They're going to be right down to the wire for going to the Super Bowl yet again. The defense lacks talent, but they do things systematically to do things like they did today against the Jets. Like, this is more or less the same New England team. The only thing I will say is the AFC is much better than it's been, so they're going to have a harder road to get back to the Super Bowl. And then for the Jets, I don't really know what else you can say at this point. They just are a mess. So let's get into the studs and duds. Just 2 risers here for the Jets. They did show some nice things in the first 3 quarters of this game. So Christopher Herndon continues to come on, and we had kind of rose him, whatever past tense of rise is, risen maybe, yeah, risen him. I don't know, sounds weird, but we had done that for Chris Herndon. But he hadn't been getting the reps to really back up to say okay, this guy's gonna be a future piece of this team. A really good starting tight end, but now he's finally getting those reps. He's continuing to improve as the year goes on as a blocker. So he's going to go up +1, 71 to a 72. Looks like a starting tight end at worst for this Jets team that just needs starters across the board at every position. And then Jamal Adams is just a stud. If this defense ever figures this thing out, he's going to be a superstar, like a Malcolm Jenkins, Landon Collins, when they're surrounded by good defenses. Jamal Adams is just a straight-up playmaker, but right now they ask him to do so many things that he has on and off games because he's their best player on this team by a landslide. So I think he's a guy that 2-3 years from now, if the Jets can do things right, we're going to look at him as a Harrison Smith type of player, just these elite safeties. He can do everything just like those guys. Then we got the Giants at the Eagles. Eagles, I thought were really going to, kind of take this game away and kind of win, not necessarily by a lot, but convincingly, and it really took until the end of the game for them to pull through. Definitely big for them to get a win and get some momentum for the team that I picked last week to still win this NFC East. Now Dallas won last night, so that doesn't help. But then on the Giants side, they're done. They've been done since the season started. They were never going to win with this offensive line, with Eli Manning, with this defense that frankly is underwhelming. They just have a lot of work to do. And looking forward to doing my Giants rebuild because we're going to jump right in at week 13. A little selfish plug here. Don't miss that. Tomorrow morning when we drop that, we'll see what I would do taking over this Giants team. But, not much else really to talk about. This game really went according to plan, I think. So the studs and duds here. Big shout out here to Grant Haley, undersized corner for the Giants. I tweeted this out but he is 5'9", but he has like a 6'5" 3-cone, sub 6'5" 3-cone, under a 4-foot shuttle. Like, for the draft nerds, like, that is just premier times. And he's got a 4.45 40. Just a super good athlete. And his college tape was really good. I watched a lot of Penn State games last year, and he popped as that nickel back. And he's doing the same thing here for the Giants. Just, he sticks in coverage because he's so quick. He can tackle at his size, like just the premier, like the ideal nickel defender, nickel corner. So Grant Haley, +2, 68 to a 70. Big fan of him. And then Josh Adams, another undrafted guy. He's fine. I don't think he's ever going to be a star, but he's fine. The running back for the Eagles. And then Zach Ertz is going to get a +2. He's just so consistent. And he's blocking a little better this year, which is why I'm willing to do this. 85 to an 87, but just such a good receiving threat. Time to give him a little love here. And then Golden Tate's going to come down 3, 84 to an 81. Just, he gets traded. He has not been the same in this Philly system. I was willing to give him some time to see if he could get acclimated, but he doesn't create a lot of separation. He's always been a really good run after catch guy. He's tough. He's still a good receiver, but just not the same right now. And then Camus Kruger-Hill had a really good first game of the year. He's been a little more quiet, but he's coming on again lately here. He's gained weight. He's put on like 10 pounds as a safety coming out, but an athletic as hell linebacker, playing good run defense, getting a little love here, +2, 70 to a 72. Next up, we got Seattle at Carolina. This was a really big game, but it was also a fun game to watch. Back and forth. Russell Wilson was special in this game. And, Carolina was about what I expected. Just, some big plays, just did enough offensively. The defense, the secondary is a big problem. They dealt with some injuries in this one. So I think Carolina's done. I think we're safe to say that. They now have to play the Saints twice, who are going to want those games now that they lost to Dallas. I think Carolina's done. Seattle now is really in this thing with Minnesota for that wild card. Seattle now has to play not the Rams again. They play the Chiefs and Minnesota. So we're probably going to be looking at Seattle and Minnesota. I still think Green Bay is lingering around just because their schedule is a joke. But Seattle, this was a huge win to get themselves, really in control of their own destiny for the wild card. And they're a team that can play spoiler if they get in. Like, this is a big win to go into Carolina and win. Like, you're proving that you can beat the best teams in this league. And they've played the Rams tough as well, and we're going to see them against the Chiefs here in a few weeks. A lot of that is just credit to Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll for what he's done with this defense. So the risers and fallers here. This was a confusing game if you had either David Moore or DJ Moore on your fantasy team, because both DJ Moore and David Moore had good games, and both of them are going to go up 1. DJ Moore, receiver for the Panthers, from a 76 to a 77. He's emerging as a really good first-round pick, a future playmaker. It just reminds you so much of Steve Smith, just the playmaking ability after the catch, just incredible. And then kind of the opposite here with David Moore, who's more of a deep threat. He's an undrafted guy, just actually a complete opposite of DJ Moore, who's more of he could be a deep threat, but more of a catch and run guy at the moment. David Moore, they found this guy out of nowhere, really sparked in the preseason, and he's continued to turn into this team's arguably best receiver this year. Tyler Lockett's going to go up +1 as well. He's been great, 76 to a 77. Tyler Lockett's proving me wrong. I really questioned that contract he got. He got a 3-year, like $40 million contract or something. He got a big deal. Definitely over $10 million a year. It might have been for 4 years. But he's been great. And then Trey Flowers, this is another situation where Seattle's proven me wrong, because he was a safety that I didn't even like at safety. I thought he was super stiff. His workouts sucked. But they look at him and they say, hey, 6'3", 200-pound defensive back, let's stick him at corner. See if he can be our Brandon Browner. And that's exactly what he's doing. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be like super good. Like we saw the best version of Brandon Browner was a player that went to a different team and couldn't do anything outside of this scheme. I think that's probably Trey Flowers, but inside this scheme that they run, they love these big, lengthy press corners. He can have a nice starting role on this team and be a nice player. And yeah, that's everyone. We already talked about DJ Moore for Carolina. No other movement there for Carolina. So Jacksonville at Buffalo. This game was surprisingly more fun to watch than anyone probably imagined. Buffalo's defense is really good. Josh Allen's just fun to watch in general. Like, you never know what's going to happen. That throw he made was remarkable. Just about to get sacked and just hit his guy in stride, like 60 yards downfield. It was crazy. I mean, it wasn't necessarily in stride. It was a little over his head, but you'll forgive that when you're getting swarmed and throwing it that far downfield. And then for Jacksonville, it's over. Like, everything is over. I'm sorry. You got no cap space. You don't have a quarterback. Your defense is getting older. People are like, oh, they should trade for Joe Flacco. No, that Joe Flacco is not going to make this team a Super Bowl contender. You had your chance last year. I would argue you had a chance this year, but you decided that Blake Bortles was going to lead the charge at quarterback, and it's over. In this era of football, you create windows. You go after it in free agency. You draft well. You try to get a cheap quarterback, and that's what you got to do if you don't have an elite quarterback. And it's just over. You got to blow this thing up. I would start trading away if I were in charge here. I would trade away Calais Campbell. I would trade away A.J. Boye. All of these veteran defensive linemen that by the time you get a quarterback are going to be 33 years old, 34 years old. Like, just get draft capital and try to do your best to get a new quarterback and build around him with offense, because this window is over for Jacksonville. As for Buffalo, you're just getting this thing going. It's going to be interesting because their defense has a window right now. They've got some veterans on this team. They're many years away when you really look at it, because they're going to have to continue to draft well offensively and defensively. But I do like the coach, and honestly, I've liked Josh Allen throughout this entire process. He's no lock to even be a starting caliber quarterback. He definitely could be a bust, but the upside, you cannot deny it. And if they do a good job to put the pieces around him, like, there's no reason he couldn't do what Patrick Mahomes is doing right now. Like, it just really isn't. Like, he's not inaccurate. He just needs to learn how to operate within a system, which he's never really had the chance to do. So you got to put that system around him. And then studs and duds. D.D. Westbrook for the Jaguars. He's going to go up +1. He's had a decent year. Like, all things considered, I guess. You know, just a good playmaker, good catch and run guy. They basically just use him on crossers and stuff, but that is what he does exceptionally well. Maybe if they can get an actual quarterback situation here, he can become more of a deep threat, a more reliable deep threat to show off that speed a little more. Still a young player, good upside, former Heisman candidate at wide receiver. And then we got Robert Foster here. And I'm like one more good week from Foster away from just buying all in. So let's just, who is Robert Foster? So he is a 6'2", 196-pound receiver out of Alabama. And he runs a good 40 time. You know, he's like a 4.45 guy, I want to say. He's a typical, like, former 5-star Alabama recruit. Like your Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, you know, same type of prototype. We're talking about the same kind of athlete. Obviously not the same production. And then he comes in, and he's sitting behind Calvin Ridley and all of these other wide receivers that we're seeing now at Alabama, who are just, like, all three of the guys they have there right now on this incredible Bama team are potentially first-round picks. So he is just buried on the depth chart, just absolutely buried. And then he comes here into Buffalo, and they've got nobody. And he is in here, and he's started now 2 weeks in a row, and he's just killing it. So if we keep seeing this, like, his ceiling is actually really high. Like, he could be a number one receiver in this league. Like, the next, I won't go this far, but, you know, the Antonio Brown story of a guy that just was overlooked and is a really good athlete and comes in the right situation and is just a stud. So we'll see. I'm pumping the brakes. You know, he's going +5, 64 to a 69. I'm not all in yet, but I am in. That's for sure on Robert Foster. So Oakland at Baltimore here. Man, I don't want to talk about Oakland. Like, it's just a disaster. I have been hard enough on John Gruden, the general manager. This roster is just a joke. And then Baltimore, it's more fun to watch, but it's still not super fun to watch. Their defense is legit. No one's questioning that. And then offensively, like, they're just running the ball. That's basically it. Like, Lamar has shown some moments throwing the game. He throwing the ball in this game. He had some nice throws for sure. How consistent can he be? Only time will tell. And I've kind of had 1 foot in, 1 foot out on Lamar Jackson. If you couldn't tell this entire time, I'm not ready to make a statement either way, because I do definitely see the upside. The mobility is incredible. But on the other hand, I'm like, he isn't very accurate. Some people deny that. I just don't see him throwing the most accurate football. He could improve it. His mechanics are fine. But then there's also the fact that he's just getting hit too much, and he could get hurt. So I'm just taking a wait and see an approach with Lamar Jackson. No rise or fall for him yet. Could definitely be coming. And then let's do the studs and duds here. Jordy Nelson. Remember like 6-7 weeks ago when he made a few big plays and everyone was like, oh, Jordy Nelson's back. Nope. He's been god-awful ever since. And I wasn't the only one with this take, but I thought that was one of the worst moves to like get rid of Crabtree for Jordy Nelson. It just didn't make any sense. And he just hasn't done anything. Like, he's just not getting open, and I don't know, just not good. -2, 76 to a 74. Then Matthew Judon, and he's interesting. I know a lot of Ravens fans think I'm low on him. I'm basically following suit with PFF because when I watch the Ravens, I don't consistently notice Matt Judon. He gets big sacks. Like, he's had good sack numbers throughout his career, but his hurry numbers are low. He doesn't grade out very well with PFF. And I tend to agree with that. But at some point, you produce, you make an impact, your defense rocks. Like, he had 3 sacks in this game and then just, like, runs into the tunnel. Like, see you guys. My work is done here. There's, like, 3 minutes left, and he gets his 3rd sack in a row on, like, 3 straight plays. And he's just like, deuces, I'm out. I'll see you guys in the locker room. Like, that's pretty badass. Like, I'm starting to get in on Matthew Judon a little bit. I'd like to see him pop a little more on film, but he had an excellent game. So finally a rise for Matthew Judon, who has had a pretty solid season despite not grading out very well. So +2, 74 to a 76. We'll see if he goes up more or if he continues to maybe just fall off again. We'll see. So let's move on. Cleveland at Cincinnati. Let's talk about Baker Mayfield a little bit. I've said this now since probably week 3, since the second I saw him on an NFL field, basically. I was wrong about Baker Mayfield. People are wrong about prospects all the time. I have no shame, but I'm also not going to sit here and keep talking myself into him being this, next Case Keenum. Like, he's shown me more now at the NFL than I thought I saw at college. I think that's fair. I was just low on him coming in. And I still don't know what his true upside is. Can he be Drew Brees? Maybe. I don't know. I still don't really see a whole lot of, deep ball, big plays down the field from Baker. He has shown the arm talent to get it there, at least, that I wasn't sure he had. So we'll see if he can continue to get a better scheme and better receivers around him. We'll see. But I definitely, where I think it was most wrong, underestimated his ability to come in and just look as composed as he has. I knew he was going to come in and really be ready to play, but he just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He is throwing into windows that most quarterbacks just don't see. Like, his field vision is incredible, and he's operating the offense super efficiently. Like, he's the definition of the modern quarterback. And I don't know if he's going to be Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he will be. I just don't see the consistent big play ability of some of the other elite quarterbacks in this league. But he's looking like a good pick for Cleveland, for sure. So let's move on. Cincinnati is just a mess. They've got so many injuries on both sides of the ball. I originally picked Cincinnati in this game and then tried to rehash that in my picks video in the comments when we found out that AJ Green and Cordy Glenn were going to be out, who I expected to play. And you take those two pieces away, and this team is just a mess. Defensively, they got a bunch of injuries, and they are just going downhill. I would move on from Marvin Lewis. I would move on from AJ Green and just try something new here. But they seem to be content here. Like, it's not a terrible football team. They'll probably just not change anything, to be honest. So the other studs and duds here. Baker is a stud, by the way, +1, 76 to a 77. Antonio Callaway has come on a little bit. Rookie wide receiver for the Browns, 69 to a 70. And then David Njoku, he's going to go +1, 76 to a 77. We know he can be a big-time receiving threat. He's been a little more consistent lately. Former first-round pick, just has had ups and downs throughout his career, but he's also blocking well now, which is great to see. Jabril Peppers for the Browns, first-round pick from last year as well at safety. He's getting more comfortable. They're using him more as a strong safety this year. He'll still play that rangy center field that they used him almost full-time last year, but he's definitely better in the box, and he's just playing better. And he's going to go +1, 72 to a 73. He's a high-ceiling player that if he continues to develop, could be a really nice player on this defense on the back end of basically Myles Garrett. So then flipping over to the Bengals, we got a couple veteran defenders here falling. Vontaze Burfict, -4. He just can't tackle this year. And I know he's been in and out of the lineup, and it just has been a bad beat for him this year, but he has been terrible out there. Like, he just forgot how to tackle. And then William Jackson, I still think he's got a great future. Super talented. It's not that he's had a bad year. He just has not repeated what he was able to do last year. So he's going to come down 86 to an 85. Still got a bright future when this team can get some better things going here. But just a little bit of a drop-off from where he was last year. Next, we got the Niners at the Bucks. Yes, I did actually watch this entire game, believe it or not. San Francisco actually did some nice things offensively. The offensive line continues to play at a really high level. Nick Mullins, not a starting quarterback in this league. Like, he's a low-end backup at best. And then the Niners defense just got destroyed by a really good Bucks offense. Jameis is making his case for getting a second chance here. And he showed why he was the number 1 overall pick again in this game. And I think if you're Tampa, you enter next year kind of like I am with Lamar Jackson, like 1 foot in on Jameis and 1 foot out. I think you bring someone else in. You invest, even though you want to use a pick on defense, I think you invest in a young quarterback to just, even if he never plays, just whip Jameis's ass into shape here. Like, let him know that you can't just dick around anymore. Like, what you have done so far in your career is not acceptable. You've got to put your foot on the gas and start developing now before we got to pay you an F ton of money. So let's do the studs and duds here. For the Niners, like I said, the offense did some nice things. Matt Breida, he's going to go up 1. He's just, every time he gets the ball, he seems to, not every time, but he has these explosive plays. He's an explosive player. I don't know how this guy went undrafted. Like, I just found out editing the roster today. I just noticed that him and Jerick McKinnon, both out of Georgia Southern. Jerick McKinnon was a 3rd-round pick. Matt Breida is just as good of an athlete as Jerick McKinnon. He's even taller. So I'm surprised Matt Breida went undrafted. That was a better running back class that he came out of. But he looks like an NFL starting running back. He's really explosive. So I'm buying into him. It will be interesting to see what they do with him and McKinnon. I bet they just keep them both and play whoever's healthy, because neither of these guys have proved that they can stay healthy in their career. And then on the offensive line, Laken Tomlinson. Like, shame on Detroit, because you let Laken Tomlinson go, and then you use a 1st-round pick to draft Frank Ragnow, who you're going to start at left guard. Like, Laken Tomlinson was a former 1st-round pick. You just couldn't develop the guy. And now Kyle Shanahan gets him, and all of a sudden he's like a really good starting caliber guard. A good steal for the 49ers, and the Lions just, I don't know what they've done with their offensive line coach. Like, I'm not going to act like I've been following that situation very closely, but they have all the talent in the world in Detroit, but they just can't seem to play physical and develop guys. It's just kind of a mess. And then on the defensive side for the Niners, Fred Warner had a really good game. He was about the only one on defense that wanted to show up on that game, though. But Fred Warner, young rookie out of BYU, he's going to go up 1, 73 to a 74. Laken Tomlinson, by the way, 73 to a 74. I can't remember if I said that. And then flipping over to Tampa Bay, we've got Ryan Jensen. Was hard on him earlier this year, kind of a breakout year last season at center for the Ravens. But he's settled in here for Tampa, who's kind of rolling offensively, and he's done really good in pass protection there as a high-paid center there. So 74 to a 75 for Ryan Jensen. And then Carl Nassib continues to impress. He week to week is just getting better. He is officially this team's best edge rusher. It's not even close. But he plays good run defense as well. Cleveland, I don't know why they let him go. It's not that they're struggling on the edge, but Carl Nassib is better than anything Cleveland has on the other side of Myles Garrett. That's for damn sure. So Cleveland probably would love to have him back. So let's move on. Arizona at the LA Chargers. Just a blowout. But Arizona, you could argue, at least has the most holes of any team in the NFL right now. And the Chargers are the opposite. The Chargers are just a studly roster, so they were just whooping every positional matchup in this game. It does suck that Melvin Gordon gets hurt when he does for fantasy players. But we'll talk about this running back situation in a second with their studs and duds. Chargers are just, trying to stay healthy and make the playoffs and see what happens if they can get in. Because it's not like home field's going to matter for them, even if they won the division. They're going to have to go on the road, whether they're playing in their own stadium or not. Just a mess with that soccer stadium. But this team, and we'll see them play in Pittsburgh this week, see if this holds up. But they can beat anyone. I firmly believe they have, with Joey Bosa back now, the best roster in the NFL. They don't have any, advantage in terms of coaching or home field advantage. But, my God, can you imagine if this was the Seahawks team? They'd be Super Bowl favorites with Pete Carroll and that home field. God, I feel bad for that front office, who's actually done an incredible job there for the Chargers. So the risers here, both for the Chargers. Justin Jackson, we had dropped him off because he got practice squatted to start the year, but this was a running back I really liked, at a 5th-round grade on him. He goes undrafted out of Northwestern. Just a quick dude. I think he is probably a better between the tackles runner than Austin Eckler, who has had a good year, but I think Justin Jackson, with this Melvin Gordon injury, is going to get a decent amount of playing time. I'm excited to see what he can look like. So he goes +2, 67 to a 69. And then Derwin James, +1 again, 82 to an 83. Just incredible. Basically everything we said about Jamal Adams. These two guys are pretty much the same player. They're just freak athletes, versatile, instinctive safeties. I can't believe so many teams passed on him. It's just remarkable. What a steal. Just what a steal. Great. I love Derwin James. Everyone loves. He's just the love child of the NFL this year. Derwin James, love for everyone. So let's move on. Pittsburgh at Denver. This was an absolute just shit show of a game. I had money on Pittsburgh, and it was just heartbreaking. Pittsburgh straight up gave 20 points away. You had a fumble into the end zone. You had a missed field goal. You had a fumble by James Conner in the fourth quarter, who has been terrible for 2 weeks now, by the way. We'll talk about James Conner. And then the interception on the 1-yard line to Shelby Harris. I would say at least 20 points were given away in this game. And they still lost on the last play of the game. So credit Denver for some takeaways, for playing well, for beating this team, for beating the Chargers last week. They are playing well. Case Keenum is playing great. Emmanuel Sanders is having a career year. And this defense is coming on. Denver looks good. They just might be a playoff team. That's great. But Pittsburgh, you just keep shooting yourselves in the foot. It's crazy. And they did it the week before in Jacksonville. They've now lost 2 straight games. Well, I keep thinking they lost that game in Jacksonville because it was that ugly, but they actually won. They pulled it out of their ass in the end. So Pittsburgh, if they could just figure some things out and get some consistency for once in this organization, this organization has been incredibly consistent over the history of the NFL. Let me take that back. Over this last 5-year era with Mike Tomlin and Big Ben and Antonio Brown, their ceiling, the fact that they haven't won a Super Bowl with Antonio Brown and Big Ben and Le'Veon and this offensive line, it is such a tragedy because they've had so much talent over this stretch. And the last 2 weeks have been a microcosm of that. So let's do the studs and duds here. James Conner, -2. I took some flack for being slow to raise him after his stats were incredible for the first 10 weeks of the year. But this is why I'm not a stats guy, guys. Like, James Conner is in the most running back friendly system in the NFL, and I love James Conner. I got him on my dynasty team. Like, I drafted the dude early. Great story. As a third-round prospect coming out, he was a great power back option and a guy that I really liked and still do like. But he is not Le'Veon Bell, people. The last 2 weeks have clearly proved that. The fumble in the fourth quarter was inexcusable. He's not creating big plays like Le'Veon can do. He's fine. He is fine. He is a starting caliber power back in this league. He's like your Alex Collins, or maybe what we're seeing from the Gus Bus, or, he's fine. He's got good hands. Like, he's solid. He's never going to be a superstar running back. He might produce like a superstar running back here in Pittsburgh for 3 years and be a fantasy darling, but I just don't see the upside. He's not that explosive. And we've now seen some situations where he's dropping balls in the fourth quarter like he was against Jacksonville. He's fumbling balls. Just not a superstar player, in my opinion. He's going to produce, for sure, in this system. But I'm definitely, I'm not going to say I'm out on James Conner, but I'm definitely phasing him out. And I think we've seen the ceiling for him. We'll see, though. And then Vince Williams, he's had a great year for Pittsburgh. Up until this year, I thought he stunk. I thought he was slow and not instinctive, bad in coverage. That's been the opposite this year. He's been one of their best players defensively. He's been really impressive. I was definitely wrong on him. He's going +2, 71 to a 73. 73 sounds low, but it's actually up there for linebackers. That's, I think, in the top 20 for middle linebackers, just based on the way Madden rates them. These are Madden ratings, by the way, for those that are new to the podcast this week and is confused to what's going on. But if you couldn't tell, it applies to everything I think about them in real life as well. Anyway, Emmanuel Sanders, like we said, a career year, +1, 83 to an 84. He's back. He's healthy. He's making great catches. He's always been a guy that will make really impressive catches in traffic, but he's got his speed back, and he's been a huge reason the Broncos have won these last 2 weeks. Shelby Harris has had a great year, not just the pick on the goal line. Frankly, I don't really care about that. It does show that he can make some big plays when needed, but he's been great in run defense. He's been one of the highest-rated defensive players. He's one of the highest-rated defensive linemen in the NFL this year. I wouldn't expect him to come back and repeat that next year or anything, but you got to give him his credit. +2, 73 to a 75. Good run-defending defensive tackle. And then Will Parks, this could be another riser next week. He has become the starter here, and frankly, I don't know exactly why. There's got to be injuries there. But he's playing well at the safety position, 68 to a 69. Could definitely continue to go up. So we got 3 games left here. I think we're going to keep this under an hour for the first time. So Miami at Indianapolis. Fun game to watch. Indianapolis, Andrew Luck, the comeback king, in my opinion. He is great in the second half of games, even if he falls behind. We saw more of that. We saw more of, just the Dolphins trying to survive with Ryan Tannehill and a conservative offense approach and playing defense and getting big plays. It's been the same thing for Miami all year. But the Colts are red freaking hot right now. They're blocking like crazy. They're getting production from total nobodies at the receiver position, and Andrew Luck is at the heart of it all. And he's healthy, and he's back, and he's a bad man. So the risers and fallers here, Leonte Carroo for the Miami Dolphins has re-entered the scene here. This was a third-round pick that they traded up for that, amidst the signings of Kenny Stills and Danny Amendola and Albert Wilson, he just never got an opportunity, even though he's a player that clearly they liked after they trade up for him and a lot of draft analysts really liked. Just never got an opportunity, and he's actually finally getting it, ironically. I think they actually cut him earlier this year. He makes his way back onto the roster, I think probably through the practice squad. So he's going to go from a 64 to a 67. He's entering the radar again, basically. We'll see if he can continue to produce or if he falls off again. But he is a talented physical receiver with some upside. And then Jerome Baker, we talked about him basically playing strong safety, box linebacker, or box safety, nickel linebacker at 6'2", 215. But, basically being this team's Telvin Smith, and I really like what this team has in that second level of the defense. Jerome Baker, Raekwon McMillan, and the Bama Minkah Fitzpatrick. Between those three, you've got three really solid, second level of the defense defenders there. They've had some inconsistencies, but they're going to continue to grow together too because they're all really young. And then Xavier Howard, he's definitely inconsistent and has had his ups and downs, but his highs are really high. That's for sure. He can be a lockdown corner. He reminds me a lot of Xavier Rhodes in that way. Not just because his first name is Xavier or Xavian. They are actually really similar players. They're like 6'1", they're fast, a little stiffer, but really good in press coverage, and their highs are really high at that size. But they do have some inconsistencies because they are a little, stiffer, not quite as quick. Depends on their matchup a little more. But +2 for Xavier Howard, 75 to a 77, becoming more of that reliable starting number one corner. Eric Ebron, +1, 76 to a 77. Just killing it. Like, what a signing. Definitely one of the 10 best signings of the year. And then Mark Lewinsky, another great signing. They pick him up from Seattle's practice squad, of all people, who have a terrible offensive line. He comes in because of injury, and he's been one of the highest rated guards in that stretch since he's been starting. 70 to a 71 for Mark Lewinsky at right guard. So now we got the Packers at Vikings game. Competitive game. Packers just not able to do enough, continuing their struggles of miscommunications, Rodgers being off page with his receivers, with himself, with McCarthy, and then the defense, just a ton of injuries for the Packers defense. And then for the Vikings, just doing what they do best. Played great defense in this game. No surprise at the bank. And then offensively, they just did enough. A lot of Vikings fans were asking me on Twitter if Kirk was going to get that one overall back. No. Kirk was Kirk in this game. His receivers are great. Dalvin Cook had a fantastic game in this one. But the Vikings, I thought, were who we thought they were this week. So let's talk about the studs and duds here. Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So he got a +2 during the Patriot game 3 weeks ago. And he looked like he was ready to emerge as this vertical threat. He's a freak athlete. He's 6'5", runs a 4.35 or something like that. And then since then, he just has disappeared. They just stopped using him. And I don't understand what's going on there, but he has completely fallen off the face of the earth. He's still getting reps. He's just not getting open or not getting targeted, but not playing well. And then Blake Martinez, the kickoff specialist, as he's known on this channel, proving that that's exactly what he is. He belongs on special teams. He has zero instincts in run defense. If you're an open ball carrier and you're running at him, he can make a tackle if there's no one around him. But, you ask him to shoot a gap and make a tackle for a loss or, cover anyone. This was the great matchup between, in my opinion, the two most overrated players in this league, Blake Martinez and Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph had, by a landslide, his highest rated grade of the year, his most productive game of the year. Well, he's got Blake Martinez covering. No surprise there. So -2 for Blake Martinez, 74 to a 72. There are so many players starting for this Packers defense, whether by design or because of injury, that it's just laughable right now. They've got Antonio Morrison starting at linebacker, who was a train wreck in this game. Kentrell Bryce, they still continue to try and force him out there despite being injured. It's not like he's any good to begin with. It's just a mess. Defensively, they still have a lot of upside. I do believe that. They've got some really good players on that team, but the size of the holes is remarkable, and the Vikings just capitalized on the big weaknesses of this defense. That was backtracking a little bit. But then for the Vikings, Mackenzie Alexander is going to go at +1 for the second week in a row. Coverage, I've got questions about him in terms of how smart he can be in coverage. But he's a physical player. He plays great run defense. They've got him in the correct role here as that nickel defender, kind of that strong safety, slot corner. He's going to do a little bit of both, but he's playing really well run defense. His tackling has been fantastic, shutting down the run game. So the last game here, the Monday night game, Tennessee at Houston. Tennessee kind of shot themselves in the foot in this game, to be honest. This could have been a really good football game that came down to the wire. But they fumble a kick return in the first half. They go for it on fourth down with a terrible play call. And they really leave, it's probably about a 10 to a 14-point swing on the board in that situation. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Houston. They played incredible. And Deshaun Watson is a force to be reckoned with right now, and that defense is lights out. Like Houston is rolling. I do think a good version of Tennessee showed up this week. They just had a few mental mistakes. Both these teams actually I thought looked pretty good this week. Tennessee is just kind of falling off, and Houston is right in the running there. So let's talk about the studs and duds here. Deshaun Watson's going to go up 177 to a 78. I almost went up +2. He really has been impressive. Started slow coming off the injury, but he's coming to his own. Seems to be fully back mobily, so he can handle that poor pass protection. That is the reason I would be a little lower on Houston, is they just can't block anyone. But you've got You've got DeAndre Hopkins. You've got these D's on this team between Watson, Hopkins, and now Demaryius Thomas. That's going to be a freaking head scratcher moving forward, trying to get those straight. But you got some playmakers here. And then Lamar Miller, +1, 78 to a 79. Where's he been? Well, there he is, 97 yards to the house. Just showing that he's still got it in the tank. Good to see. Honestly, did not think he had a 97-yard rush where he's outrunning fast defensive backs in him, and he still does. So good for him. 78 to a 79. His lack of production definitely, I would think now, more of a sign of how bad the blocking is as opposed to him as a player. I've never been high on Lamar Miller, but he's a starting running back. Like, they haven't cut him on that big contract. Like, they still like him. He's fine. He's solid. He's a good running back. They could do worse. And then J.J. Watt, we'll end the podcast with him. Like, welcome back, dude. So good to have a healthy J.J. Watt back in the league. He's one of the most fun players in this league to watch. Just the things he can do off the edge, on the interior. Is there a more intimidating matchup? Like Khalil Mack, I guess. But like if you're a tackle and you see J.J. Watt on the other side, is there a more intimidating player that you want to go up against less than J.J. Watt? I don't think so. Like the size-speed comparison, the ability that he can set up any type of move, he's playing right on that level with Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald this year. So that's going to do it for the podcast this week. Reminder, guys, hit that like button here on YouTube, and then we'll hopefully have it up on Podcast World on your selective apps within the week. And enjoy your weekend. I'm excited for another week of football, man. It's going to be a good one. So we'll see you soon for the Giants rebuilds, and peace out, guys.